What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, September 24th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. MLB season wrapping up, but we still have a little bit of time left. Still good money to be made. $50K to first in the $8 tournament on DraftKings today. $100K to first in the $100. So still money to be made here at the end of the season. It has, I think, been an up and down season for me at least, probably for you guys too, but still kind of sucks to see it wrap up. I do always enjoy MLB DFS, but a little bit of time left. So I'm going to go through this slate like I normally do on this show, going position by position, stack by stack, looking at what I'd be getting to if the slate started right now on DraftKings. As always, there is the caveat that we were missing like half, 40% of the lineups when I went through my process and built my lineup. So there is almost a guaranteed chance that I'm getting to somebody at some point that isn't actually playing today. Obviously, just kind of have to overlook that and deal with it. But if I do mention somebody that I didn't realize is out, go ahead and let me know. Also, if you have questions about guys that you like, guys that you're getting to, maybe I'm not, feel free to ask. As usual, the answer probably is just going to be that you can make good lineups with them too. But once in a while, there are actual reasons maybe why I don't like somebody. So feel free to ask if that's the case. But just going to go through as usual. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you get alerts when our shows go live. The scheduling on this channel obviously has been changing a bit with NFL. We've had Nerdy and Davis and Brick on here doing some underdog battle royale drafts. Obviously, with baseball wrapping up too, the schedule will change, at least until we get into basketball season, and then we'll have this show for NBA. I know some people have asked about that. So notifications so that you know when we actually have shows going. Now, starting with the pitching, pretty flat on this slate, but there are a couple guys standing out at the top. Bailey Ober showing up the most for me at 42%. He's projected for 32% ownership. Nice matchup here against Miami in Minnesota. The Marlins are just one of the weaker offenses in baseball. Bailey Ober is a solid pitcher overall. Against right-handed pitching so far this season, Miami's active roster is only 15th in strikeout percentage, so middle of the road at striking out, but they also have a 98 WRC plus, so below average offense. They strike out enough, and Ober, as I mentioned, just a solid pitcher overall. The price tag at 8,600 is affordable. 27% strikeout percentage for him on the season, 6% walk percentage. Also, forgot to mention it at the top, but it's from a weather standpoint, doesn't look like we have anything that looks too terrible. The Washington game is not on the slate, so that doesn't matter. Looks like weather should be okay today. As always, do keep an eye on that getting closer to lock, but I don't think we have anything that is affecting decision-making there, at least as of right now. So Bailey Ober looking good for me. Brandon Pfaadt, 22% ownership. I'm getting 32%. Another decent matchup here against the Giants. San Francisco ranked 7th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They have a 99 WRC plus. This game is in Arizona, so it's not Oracle Park, but it's still a pretty good place to pitch. Pfaadt has had a good season overall, striking out 23.8% of hitters, only walking about 5.5%, 3.62 xFIP. Also just ran my strikeout prop sims and over 6.5 there, and I think it was plus 129 showed up as a good bet. So pretty much everything I'm doing today has Brandon Pfaadt looking pretty good in this spot. Happy to get to him at 8,200. Bowden Francis has pitched really, really well as a starter this year. Started out the year in kind of that long relief role out of the bullpen. But as a starter, 25.5% K percentage, walking less than 5% of hitters, 3.92 xFIP. Dangerous matchup against the Red Sox, but there are strikeouts to be had. Boston's active roster is in the top 10 in strikeout percentage, 107 WRC plus. That WRC plus obviously did take a hit with Rafael Devers being out for the rest of the season. It is still a dangerous offense, but clearly not as dangerous as when Devers is in. And also today, no Tyler O'Neill. Willie Abreu sitting toward the bottom of the order. So when it comes to Red Sox lineups, there are still certainly guys in this lineup that can do damage, but this one looks pretty bad on the scale of Red Sox lineups. Romy Gonzalez hitting second, Tristan Casas third, Trevor Story fourth. These guys were hitting, in Romy Gonzalez's case, not playing against right-handed pitching, a week or two weeks ago. Casas was hitting toward the bottom of the order. So obviously not there anywhere close to their full strength lineup. That does make Francis look a little bit better as well. Nathan Eovaldi, a little over the field on him, 21% for the field at 8,700, 30% for me. Good strikeout matchup against Oakland. We do know this is an offense that has a lot of power. They can do a lot of damage, but their active roster does also rank third in strikeout percentage. So 108 WRC plus. It is a park upgrade for Eovaldi, getting out of home run friendly Globe Life Park. So that looks good as well. We do not have an Oakland lineup yet. One thing always keep in mind with them, I don't think it'll be the case. It's not the lineup that is being projected. If Jacob Wilson leads off, it will be a minor downgrade for Eovaldi, just from a strikeout standpoint. Not that Wilson is a great, established major league hitter or anything, but he is very difficult to strike out. So you would prefer, if you're rostering a pitcher against Oakland, you would prefer having Wilson not play. But if that's not going to be an option, hit toward the bottom of the order, get less plate appearances against that starter. So that will be something to keep an eye on. But it's certainly not enough of a difference maker to go from, I think Eovaldi looks good, I'm playing 30%, to I don't want Eovaldi. It just would be a minor downgrade that you could catch if the Oakland lineup comes out and if Wilson does happen to be hitting toward the top. So those are the three pitchers I'm getting 30+%. Then there's a little bit of a drop off here to this next range with Framber Valdez, Clark Schmidt, Spencer Schwellenbach. Valdez and Schmidt both showing up around 18% of the time. I have not said Clark Schmidt's name in a while. I know he was out with injury, but haven't said his name in a while, so just want to double check his pitch count and all of that. But he's showing up 18%. Valdez, obviously, you're happy to get to him. $10,000 price tag is relatively expensive, but he is a good pitcher. He is in a very good strikeout matchup against Seattle. Schmidt has actually made 3 starts back, so nothing to worry about there. 99 pitches last time out, 75, 86, 99. Must have just been on days that either the Yankees weren't on the main slate or I wasn't talking about it and didn't notice. But nothing to be concerned about with his pitch count. Happy to get to him at 7,900. The Orioles lineup is getting back closer to what it was earlier in the year. It has been a pretty favorable offense to face recently when you've had Westberg out, you've had Arias out, Kerstad was out. Not that he has been with the team the whole year, but you were kind of just getting like free strikeouts as well with Kobe Mayo, with Jackson Holliday. So it is closer now to the difficult to strike out, really good lineup that we were seeing earlier in the season. No Holliday in this lineup, no Mayo. You have Jordan Westberg back, you have Arias back, Kerstad's hitting 7th. So it is, you have Cedric Mullins hitting 9th now. Mountcastle is also back, but he's not in the lineup. But this is a much more potent Baltimore lineup than we've seen for the last month or so when they've really been struggling. Still, though, at 7,900, Schmidt is perfectly fine in tournaments. Schwellenbach having a solid season. Not a great matchup against the Mets. Certainly a team that can do some damage. 113 WRC plus on their active roster. They rank 13th in strikeout percentage. 8,900 for Schwellenbach. Not a great price tag either, but he does have a 26% strikeout percentage, 3.35 xFIP. There's nothing wrong with getting to him just from an overall talent standpoint, but it's not a great matchup, and there are plenty of other pretty good pitching options in good matchups that are just going to look a little bit better. Other than that, just getting small amounts of Severino, Jonathan Cannon, Logan Gilbert, Logan Webb. The only one of those guys getting any ownership is Gilbert at around 10%. I don't think there's anything wrong with him, but it is a very tough matchup against Houston. It is in Houston as well, so he's getting out of T-Mobile Park, which is a great place to pitch. The Astros are a very good lineup. They don't strike out a lot. They are dealing with some injuries, though. We have Yoran Alvarez. Kyle Tucker is back, so it's still a good lineup, but obviously not the A-plus version of their lineup. Still a pretty tough spot to get to Gilbert. If you want to get to him a little bit, I think that's fine. I'm not getting as much as the field, though. Before I move on to stacks, going to catch up on a couple questions that I saw showing up in chat. Jake said, who's your favorite non-core stack and why is it the Padres? Padres are showing up for me. I briefly glanced before the show. They're not at the top, but they are up there, which is never something that I'm upset about. Nice park for them in LA as well. Choke Oldham said, Stochastic Sims gave me all the White Sox and no cores. What would you do in this situation? Cap exposure and boost cores a bit or go with it? I don't know specifically what I would do because I haven't used those, so I don't know exactly what your options are or how I would go about it. I talked in 2 different videos on the Endgame site about exactly how I handle that problem with SaberSim. I would probably try and find a similar solution. Basically just, I try and find, without getting into too much detail, I basically just worked on creating a process that would take the results of Sims. It's telling you what lineups do the best against the projected field, which is useful information, but also flawed and really fragile. And kind of just built a process that takes that information and then still tries to combine it in a way where I'm getting the best lineups of the lineups that tells me are really good. I'm trying to narrow it down to, the lineups that do the best. And instead of playing like all White Sox, give me, the ones that are beating out those other White Sox lineups that I could play the most. So obviously kind of a vague answer there, but I can't really give too detailed of an answer because I don't know the options with their product. And also, I have put it all out already behind the paywall at Endgame. So anybody interested in stuff like that, that's pretty much what all of our videos over there are. I've walked through my process, everything that I do. Utical has walked through how he uses Fantasy Cruncher, or I guess now maybe a different optimizer in his process, things he looks at. Brian's talked about issues with contest sims, ways that he likes to work around them. Nerdy has put out a bunch of toy game videos that on a smaller scale, solve the problems that we're trying to solve in DFS, and you can apply to different types of contests, whether it's DFS, best ball, battle royale, stuff like that. Obviously, the Discord over there also really valuable. A lot of good players in there as well, bouncing ideas off each other. So all that stuff, if you're interested, is available over there. But that is my short answer to that question. Obviously, sorry, not a perfect answer there. But yeah, I think it's I try not to do anything too arbitrary. Like, I don't want to just say, oh, I'm only playing 5 White Sox stacks or something. The big thing, I think, is spending time on a process that will like automatically do it for you. But in general, capping exposure and boosting cores a little bit is fine. It really comes down to kind of your strategy and how you want to handle it. Because the main issue with, for example, just taking a bunch of White Sox lineups because they all simulate well is that obviously only one of them can win potentially. And in top heavy tournaments with so much money at first base or in first place, my strategy, at least my approach, as you can see from my exposures, is typically to try and give myself as many different shots within one slate as I can get, because I know that I can find plus EV lineups from basically any stack, any set of players, whatever it may be. So I'm going to prioritize, in this case, a team like the White Sox that are showing up great, but I don't want, all of my lineups necessarily to be there, because at some point you just get diminishing returns. There are some players that I think have had success in DFS that do play more concentrated than me. Their approach, their thought process would simply be the White Sox are grading out the best in the stuff that I use. So I'm going to put myself in a position where if the White Sox do well, I have every opportunity to capitalize. Again, that's not my approach, but it does work for some people. So a lot of that too, the answer to that question kind of just comes down to your approach, your personal strategy for how you're playing DFS. JP Hughes said cores will be highly owned and haven't won a paint slate all season, yet people play the chalk in baseball. Sounds like the Sims are trying to get you in the first place. Yeah, I mean, cores has been wildly disappointing this year. Still obviously playing it, but also in terms of cores games, neither of these teams have an implied run total above 6. So relatively modest implied run totals here. I do know I'm getting to both teams, but yeah, it doesn't look like one of those course, like how does course fail type slates. And it's been failing constantly this year anyway. Moving on to the team stacks. Like I said, St. Louis, Colorado, I am getting to them both. St. Louis at the top, Colorado third. This is all stack types as well. I'll look at 5-mans in a second. Boston showing up for me. So that's an interesting spot where I was getting to Francis for Toronto, but I am getting some negative correlation against a popular Francis as well, with a Boston team that, while it's not at full strength, it is missing Devers. One positive of that is that it makes them a lot cheaper. And I've said this probably on every show this season. One of the big things to keep in mind when you're thinking about tournaments and the tournament winning upside, you don't necessarily always need the team that scores the absolute most runs or hits the most home runs. You need the team that gets close enough to that and gives you good pieces around them. And this Boston lineup is very inexpensive now. Jarren Duran leading off at 5,800 is expensive. No other hitter in this lineup is priced above $3,800 on DraftKings. That's Tristan Casas. So you suddenly have, even though they're not as good as Tyler O'Neill and Rafael Devers, you have a $3,300 Gonzalez hitting second. You have Trevor Story batting cleanup at 3,200. That gives you some stolen base upside too. Yoshida's in there at 3,500. Your 6 hitter is a second baseman at minimum salary in Vaughn Grissom. So there is still, now with the Red Sox, instead of it being, well, these guys are really expensive, but they're some of the best hitters on the slate, top to bottom. Now it's more so they still have some good hitters, but also if the Red Sox happen to do well, I'm going to be able to have whatever pitching I want, whatever secondary stacks, one-offs, etc. I want around this team a bunch of guys that can hit 2 home runs, and so the value component for Boston starts to look really good here. In addition to the negative correlation with Bowden and Francis, the White Sox, as previously mentioned, showing up for me as well. They are showing up as a top 5 stack. They aren't very good, but neither is Jack Kohanowitz. He does do a good job keeping the ball on the ground. Guys like that just typically have a small margin for error, though, and you have a White Sox team that does have some power in it. They are affordable, so they're showing up for me. The Angels on the other side of that game against Jonathan Cannon, a pitcher that I've compared to Kohanowitz at times this year. Cannon does have better strikeout stuff than Kohanowitz. He has also given up more power than Kohanowitz has, primarily to left-handed hitters, which is what you would expect from a pitcher with Cannon's skill set. 191 expected ISO to lefties this year, only 127 to righties so far for Cannon. 170 expected ISO to lefties for Kohanowitz, 197 to righties, not striking out anybody. So I do like offenses in this game, even though neither offense is good. Neither pitcher is particularly good either. San Diego is showing up for me. Nice park in Dodger Stadium, talented offense, so nice to get to them. Landon Knack, limited sample this year, has given up power, 183 expected ISO to lefties, 216 to righties, has a higher strikeout percentage against lefties. Don't know that will continue. He does throw a changeup against them 23% of the time, and a curveball 18%. Those are 2 pitches that when you get a pitcher that establishes reverse splits, they are typically the 2 pitches that are the reason for it. So maybe we do continue to see righties do a little bit more damage against Knack than lefties. But either way, when you're talking about the Padres, it's not like I'm going to be shying away from the lefties they have, but it certainly doesn't make me dislike getting to somebody like Manny Machado or Fernando Tatis or any of these guys. So I think they look fine. Miami, negative correlation against Ober. That's pretty much all there is to that one, in addition to being cheap. Certainly not a situation where I think Miami is particularly likely to succeed, but it is a situation where if they do, you probably can build some pretty good lineups around them. The top of the order with Edwards, Norby, and Berger has gotten very expensive. They're all priced between $4,600 and $4,900, but then after that, everybody is pretty cheap. Texas, Minnesota, Seattle, the Mets, just kind of getting spread out with these stacks down here. And that is not surprising to me. This is another one of those slates, and I kind of mentioned it with the total in cores as well. Another one of those slates where all of these teams look pretty similar for the most part. Of course, implied run totals don't tell you the whole story. Teams that have more volatile hitters, better power hitters, and a 4.5 implied run total are still going to be more favorable in DFS than a team with the same implied run total that has a bunch of singles and doubles hitters. But just from a run total standpoint, again, you can kind of pretty quickly see that a lot of teams are going to be pretty comparable in terms of their chances of success here. And my approach, as I was saying before, is on slates like that, mostly to get pretty spread out, try and get the best teams that I can of a lot of different stacks, as opposed to going really heavily on 2 or 3, kind of just saying, well, I know all these teams are the same, but I'm going to hope it's these 2 teams tonight for whatever reason. That's generally not my approach. Again, other people do approach it differently, and that's fine. But on slates like this, the exception is if I think 1 or 2 of these teams are just like really going on their own for some reason, then I will attack that team more aggressively and look to get there. But generally, especially late season where there's not a lot of casual players anymore, everybody has a pretty good idea what they're doing. Ownership ends up being pretty efficient in terms of compared to chances of winning, being the top stack. And in those cases, I'm back to basically thinking about it instead of like from a team by team level to a lineup by lineup level, where if the Red Sox ownership is efficient or the White Sox ownership is more or less efficient, I'm not jamming that team as a whole in, but I can still find Red Sox lineups or White Sox lineups, whatever it may be, that because of the way they're constructed, the players that are in them individually create a lineup that I still project to be plus EV. So that's what's happening on a slate like this, where I am just getting really spread out for the most part across a lot of teams. 5-man stacks, Cardinals showing up at the top, San Diego showing up the second most. Then again, just pretty spread out. Boston, the Mets, who I don't think I had specifically mentioned, but tough matchup for them going up against Schwellenbach. They do get out of Citi Field, which is nice. They do have good hitters, which is nice. Seattle, or White Sox, Seattle, Miami. So again, nothing really surprising, nothing that really stands out too much from my stacks. JB Hughes said, I've seen you almost win a couple football tournaments, college and NFL. What's the secret? Yeah, I've come frustratingly close a couple times this year. I thought I had college football wrapped up over the weekend and ended up dropping to like 14th or something. So that one sucked. But no, I mean, I've had success in both sports before. I don't have a ton of knowledge about either one. I know nothing about college football, but the nice thing about, kind of I was saying before, spending time creating a process that consistently gives you sets of lineups that you want to play and that are quality lineups. It's nice because it's kind of like front loaded work. Like I've spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that. And for the most part, it crosses over most sports. Like my strategy has to become a little bit different in dupe heavy sports like MMA or, NFL Showdown. But for the most part, my strategy in baseball, I can just apply to college football or NFL or NHL or whatever, NBA, and it's going to give me sets of quality lineups. So it's basically just, finding data that I trust, using projections from sites that I trust, throwing them into the process that I spent all my time building, and then I can, I think, just kind of win at any sport, which is nice. Obviously, if you know more about football or college football or whatever, you can probably make improvements in those specific sports. But even in sports where I don't necessarily have a ton of like ball knowing knowledge, I can just kind of carry that over, which is nice. What do I think of Schwellenbach's upside? The upside is absolutely there. Like he's a very good pitcher. He gets strikeouts. The chances of him hitting that ceiling against the Mets is lower than it would be against a lot of other teams. But that is also reflected in his ownership at 16, 17%. If he were facing a worse team, he would be more popular. So generally, when you're talking about upside, like a pitcher like Schwellenbach, the ceiling is always going to be high just because he has good stuff. He has the ability to get strikeouts. It's the chances of him hitting that ceiling that vary based on the matchup. And going up against the Mets, it is lower than if you were going up against, the Marlins or something. But he does still certainly have a ceiling just based on his talent level. Looking at catcher to start, Steve said, are there any weather concerns tonight? Nothing that looks overly concerning on the main slate, at least. Kansas City, Washington looks like it has the worst weather, but that one isn't on this slate. White Sox, Angels looks like it should be okay by the time the game starts. Yeah, so I mean it's not even summer anymore, so the risk of like pop-ups last minute goes down, but always keep an eye closer to lock. We're still an hour and a half out, but doesn't look too bad. Keith Ape said, how do you deal with the massive swings in DFS, especially for someone that plays your volume? I mean, you kind of get used to it, but also bankroll management is something that is always a work in progress for me. I'm not very good at it. I would have a lot more money and probably not be doing YouTube shows if I had just like kind of mastered that from the start and not continuously had success and then taken more shots than I should and giving it back and whatever. But yeah, I mean, you kind of just get used to it. I spend a lot of time going through like my process and just trying to make sure that I'm still playing quality lineups. That has become a lot easier with post-contest sims. They have their flaws. They're going to be biased towards people that use their projections, their data, all of that. But kind of establishing a baseline, like in my case, using SaberSim, but this is the case for any of them, kind of knowing where you usually are coming in at as far as simulated ROI and are you normally near the top in that tool or not, makes it a lot easier, I think, because like if I change something in my process and then I'm just consistently far off from where I was, there's a pretty good chance that I'm playing worse than I was, because directionally I'm just not simming out as well in the same exact product. That's not always going to be the case. Like if the change you made is going from using SaberSim projections to your own projections, you're absolutely just going to fall off in their contest sims. But assuming you don't make a change like that, just evaluating yourself in those is useful. Looking at top 1% is useful just to give you an idea of, am I frequently finishing in the top 1% of tournaments? There's not a whole lot you can do beyond that. If you're finishing in the top 1%, like 1.5% of the time, you're probably consistently playing good lineups and just haven't gotten that big win. So probably, kind of running bad there. But, looking at that kind of stuff just to kind of try and reinforce that you're playing well, I think helps. But also it's kind of just shitty and you get used to it and block it out, like compartmentalize it, I guess. But yeah, there's not a ton you can do, but there are some things I think just kind of looking at like process related stuff that helps a little bit mentally. Looking at catchers here, Logan O'Hoppe right around the field, 16% for me, 16% for the field, 3,600. think he looks good. Like I said, Jonathan Cannon does give up a lot more power to lefties than righties, but we're talking about catcher. We're talking about O'Hoppe batting fifth at a very reasonable $3,600 price tag. So I don't really care what hand he hits with. If he were the same player but left-handed, I would like it more, but still like him plenty here. Danny Jansen only getting 3 to 4% ownership. I'm at 12%. This isn't surprising. He's not somebody I love as a one-off, but if you're getting the Boston stacks, using the cheap catcher in that stack does make sense. Why not? He's hitting eighth. He's not the best hitter, but he does have some power upside. We do not have Connor Wong in this lineup either, so that is another slight benefit for the Red Sox stacks, is you don't have to choose between Wong and Jansen, although I think Wong might have first base eligibility now anyway. I don't remember. But either way, Danny Jansen showing up for me. Getting over the field on Cal Raleigh. Happy with that. The matchup sucks, but pretty much every slate, I think, I'm over the field on Cal Raleigh, and this one doesn't appear to be any different. He does get out of Seattle, which is a benefit for his home run upside. Shea Langoliers, same kind of thing. He's never that expensive, and he's got as much raw power as pretty much any catcher. He's going up against Evaldi, so it's not an easy matchup there. But Evaldi will get some ownership, and in lineups where you don't have Evaldi, why not just try and get one of the only catchers that can realistically hit 2 home runs? Pedro Pages, 10% ownership, 10% for me. Value play in cores, obviously with the assumption that he ends up being in the lineup, which I don't think we have yet. But $3,500 looks pretty good if he is in the lineup. Obviously, especially if you're playing St. Louis stacks. Hunter Goodman, same kind of thing. Don't know if he'll be in the lineup yet, but getting right around the field there. As far as where the field is going outside of O'Hoppe, it's O'Hoppe, Pages, and then a bunch of guys sub 10%. So I'm pretty spread out at catcher. So is the field. Jake said any interest in Seattle today. 4th most runs last 30 days. Julio learned how to hit again. Cheap Turner, Raleigh. Some, like they were a middle of the road stack for me. You could just see that I was getting over the field on Raleigh. The matchup here sucks. Valdez is a good pitcher, but this is a team that has power. It is a team getting out of the basically worst place to hit in baseball. Houston isn't a great park for offense, but it's better than Seattle at least. So some interest. Still don't want to go too crazy there just because of the matchup. Dre Everyday said, what do I use now that Fantasy Cruncher is in the shadow realm? I haven't used Fantasy Cruncher for a couple of years. I use SaberSim. Once Sims came out, I stopped using Fantasy Cruncher for the most part. Moving over to first base. Yeah, also leverage on Valdez is a positive. At first base, Paul Goldschmidt getting the most ownership at 16%. I'm a little below the field at 10. So clearly, in a good spot in Colorado. When it comes to games in Colorado, not the best matchup. Feltner is a competent pitcher. We also just got the Rockies lineup. We do not have Hunter Goodman. Jacob Stallings is catching. He's 4,300, so obviously don't play Hunter Goodman. But Feltner's not a horrible pitcher. Obviously it is still Coors Field. It is still a St. Louis team that has upside in this park. All of that is true. Only at 169 expected ISO to righties for Feltner this year. So, at least it's not a terrible pitcher. Like the Rockies certainly have a lot of worse guys that are scarier to not be getting a lot of hitters against. But here at least, it's a decent pitcher. Andrew Vaughn, Justin Turner, Jake Berger, all showing up 10% for me as well. So I have equal amounts: Vaughn, Turner, Berger, Goldschmidt. The field getting to Goldschmidt a lot, but then not really getting to these other three. So Justin Turner just goes back to that Seattle conversation that we just had, where they're not going to come through all that often, but they are very, very fairly priced, and they do have quality hitters that when they do come through, give you legitimate upside. It's not when they come through, they just slapped a bunch of singles and Valdez gave up 8 runs without an extra base hit. That's not the type of offense that Seattle is. So with negative correlation against the pitcher and that low ownership and cheap price tags, they do get pushed up a little bit. Jake Berger, same kind of thing. If you're going to play Miami, may as well be getting the Berger. He is one of their legitimate power hitters. The matchup against Ober isn't very good, but he is also going to be very popular. Righties do have a 178 actual or expected ISO, 190 actual ISO against him. So it's not like he's been completely great at limiting power upside or anything like that. Berger at low ownership looks fine. Spreading things out with a bunch of other guys: Arise, Soderstrom, Santana, Wade. As far as the field, Goldschmidt showing up the most for them. Like I said, I'm getting to him. He's one of my highest owned first basemen. I'm just not getting to him at the same rate as the field. And again, that's kind of just how slates like this play out for me a lot, where if a lot of players from a range of outcome standpoint are pretty similar and one or two just have higher median projections, the field typically is just going to flock to those guys. So I'm still playing those guys. I'm just giving up some of them, some of what the field is taking of them, and turning it into these other low-owned guys, some over the field on them as well. Vlad Guerrero not showing up for me. A little surprised by that one, just because I am getting to so many different offenses. Toronto looks like one of the ones that I am not getting to. Field's at about 9%. He didn't show up for me, at least at first base. Maybe I have him at third. No real crazy ownership coming into first baseman. No huge fades or anything like that for me there. Second base, I would assume that we're getting to some Vaughn Grissom, but not as much as I expected it to at 2,200. Brendan Donovan at the top, 19% for the field, 16% for me. That probably means I'm even with the field or a little bit higher once you factor in outfield. He just looks like a good value, probably hitting in the middle of this order at 4,500. So he's a case where his salary jumped because he's playing in cores, but he had just been really, really mispriced previously. He'd been like $3,400 or $3,600 or something. So when the DraftKings pricing algo just says, "Oh, you're playing in cores, let's multiply you by 1.2x or whatever it is," it was starting from like too low of a base. So he's still underpriced for cores because he was underpriced for every other part previously. So he still looks like a good value. Nicky Lopez, getting a bunch of him at second base. 3K leading off, going up against the pitcher that doesn't miss bats in Kahanowitz. He doesn't give you a lot of power upside, but he can potentially steal if he gets on base, which is nice at 3K. Also, if you're not stacking the White Sox, you can probably just ignore Nicky Lopez. He's not the type of guy that I'd want to be getting a lot of one-offs. Marcus Semien a little bit over the field there as well, going up against Oakland. So park downgrade for him and for these Rangers bats when it comes to power, but still one of the higher upside second basemen you can get to. Mitch Spence has been solid overall this year. 167 expected ISO to righties, 151 actual ISO. He has only struck righties out 16% of the time, so I don't really know what to make of that, other than it's kind of interesting because his strikeout percentage against lefties is about 24%. Brendan Rodgers in cores, surprisingly not getting that much ownership here, only getting 6%. I'm at 8%. He is hitting fifth at 4,400, so clearly he's going to look fine. Kyle Farmer, I'm about half the field. He's popular. He's $2,200. He's getting 11% ownership. He is not like huge power hitter or anything. He's not the type of guy that I mind getting away from when he's pretty popular. So he does, project as a good value. He does also have pinch hit risk here, though. We have Ryan Weathers pitching for Miami. So for Minnesota, you have Manny Margot leading off. You have Kyle Farmer hitting sixth. Those two are relatively likely to get pinch hit for. Julian is not in the lineup. Double checking just to make sure that he's not on the injured list and I missed it or anything. But assuming he's not, there's a very good chance that once you get a right-handed relief pitcher in, Kyle Farmer is becoming Julian at second base. So that's a problem. Julian's still, from what I can tell, active and all that. So you have him. You also have Brooks Lee, who's a switch hitter, who is not in the starting lineup. So that's somebody that potentially pinch hits. In the case of Manny Margot, same kind of thing. You don't have any of their left-handed outfielders in this lineup. So they can, just choose from Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach, who they want to put in for Margot once a right-handed pitcher is in there. You could get a pinch hitter for Jose Miranda just because neither of Larnach or Wallner are in the lineup. Like if Miranda comes up in a big spot against a right-handed reliever, there's a very good chance one of those guys is pinch hitting. But Margot and Farmer in particular, I think, are pretty scary from a pinch hit standpoint. Correa, Buxton, Santana, Lewis, I don't think you have to worry about. I don't think you have to worry about Ryan Jeffers. He's catching instead of DHing, which would mean obviously that they have to replace their catcher, which they're not going to want to do. So as a team, there's not as much pinch hit risk here for Minnesota, I don't think, as there usually is. But individually, there's a ton for Manny Margot and for whoever I just said, Kyle Farmer. So keep that in mind. Still good values, still can get it done in 2 or 3 at-bats, but pretty unlikely that they are still playing at the end of the game. Ozzy Albies, right around the field on him. I'm a little over the field on Donovan Walton. If he's in the lineup, that's just a pivot to Kyle Farmer, basically. 2,200 getting 1% ownership. Farmer 2,200 getting 11. I kind of just split the difference there. Same kind of thing with Nicky Lopez. He's $800 more, but for all intents and purposes, you can make pretty similar lineups, and I'm just getting to a bit more Lopez than Farmer. Again, I'm surprised I'm not using more Vaughn Grissom just because I'm already getting to Boston stacks. He'd be another guy that I think you can use as a very easy Kyle Farmer pivot. He's not the one that I'm using for whatever reason, but if like Donovan Walton's not in the lineup or something. Grissom probably just gets pushed up a little bit. The field, in addition to Donovan and Farmer, not getting anybody above double digits. Pretty, flat ownership for the most part, which I think is kind of the theme for this slate. But those two are getting ownership. I'm around the field on Donovan. I am not getting to the field on Kyle Farmer. At third base, Arenado leading the way in ownership, followed by Royce Lewis, followed by Guerrero, who, again, I'm just not getting to for whatever reason. Wouldn't be upset if that changes between now and lock. Won't care if it doesn't. However it plays out is fine. But that's the perfect example of somebody that, I don't have any actual aggressive reason to not have him. If you are looking at a lineup that you were going to play with Guerrero, you shouldn't be swapping off of it because I don't have him. It's just kind of a, for lack of a better word, randomness thing that Toronto, for whatever reason, probably some combination of price and ownership, is just kind of getting kicked out of my lineups. But Guerrero obviously is a perfectly fine play. Lewis, again, if you get there, great. The matchup against Weathers is fine. Lewis is a really, really good player, really good hitter. I wish I were getting more of him, honestly, especially at only $4,400. But probably ownership is keeping him down for me. He doesn't have pinch hit risk, though. He's the perfect guy where you could one off from Minnesota or mini stack Minnesota and create a situation where a lot of Minnesota stacks are probably going to have at least one of Margot or Farmer. And maybe late in the game, you have a situation where if you play the actual non-pinch hit guys, you have a leg up on a lot of Minnesota stacks because their guys didn't finish the game. So Royce Lewis, I think, as a one-off or in mini stacks makes a lot of sense. Arenado getting a lot of ownership at 4,900, clearly perfectly fine. Also fine with just finding some other third baseman to play. In my case, we can see that I'm just getting to a lot of low-owned third baseman here. Connor Norby, not a great spot, but he does have negative correlation against Ober. I did misspeak on the salaries for Miami earlier, too. I had the RotoWire lineup page in front of me, and for whatever reason, their salaries are off. I probably clicked the wrong slate or something. Norby, 4,200, obviously more palatable than whatever I had said earlier. Manny Machado, I like a lot here. I mentioned Landon Knack struggling with right-handed power. I mentioned that he has some reverse splits so far. Even if he didn't, it's still Manny Machado. But in this park, I like Machado quite a bit. I really like that he's not getting ownership. $300 more expensive than Arenado, so he's just going to be tough for people to click. He's not going to show up really in people that are using optimizers lineup still because you have the guy in cores for 300 less. But from a range of outcome standpoint, Machado is certainly no worse than Goldschmidt, has a ton of power, like getting there. Using Romy Gonzalez as a value option at third base looks fine to me at 3,300. Certainly doesn't carry the same level of pinch hit risk that he has in the past, given that Devers is injured. You have him starting against a right-handed pitcher. That's something that typically wasn't happening. So he can be viewed differently than he was, a couple weeks ago when he was getting starts and somebody that was pretty likely to get pitch hit for. Miguel Vargas, batting sixth at 2,500. If you're going to the White Sox, you may as well be getting the Vargas. In theory, he's one of the guys on this team that can hit. We'll see, how that ends up playing out, but he's not very far removed from being a highly regarded prospect with the Dodgers. So at 2,500, I don't mind taking my chances there, especially against a AAA or AA pitcher in Jack Kahanowitz. Matt Chapman, even with the field, Duran a little over the field. Mark Vientos is an interesting one. Again, just betting on talent. It's not a good matchup against Schwellenbach, but you do have a hitter getting a park upgrade that has a lot of power in Vientos. You're just saying, he's probably not going to have a good game. Spencer Schwellenbach is good, but when Mark Vientos has good games, they are really good games for 2% ownership at 4,600. So, that's the type of guy that I love. Just, you don't need a lot of him to be over the field. If you're playing multiple lineup sets, if you're only playing a couple lineups, then yeah, you're just probably ignoring the team facing Schwellenbach, ignoring Vientos. But on a slate like this where you are playing, this is out of 50 lineups, but if you're playing 50, 100, 150, I do like starting to take shots at guys like Vientos to just have that really, really high ceiling, even though they're not particularly likely to succeed in their specific matchup. Arenado, Lewis, yes, we already talked about that ownership. At shortstop, Mason Wynn getting a lot of it, 18%. I'm even with the field there, so not too far off, or just pretty much right in line with the field on him. The Cardinals looking kind of interesting for me, where it seems like I'm getting to the popular Cardinals at weaker positions, and then I am not getting as much of Arenado or Goldschmidt at third and first base, where you can find plenty of good high upside options. And in theory, that's exactly how you would want it to work out. May as well be playing their cheap catcher because there's not a lot of good catchers. May as well be playing their underpriced second baseman because there's not a ton of good second basemen. Same goes for shortstop. where you got 4,700 for Mason Wynn, who does have some power upside, also has the speed to take advantage of playing in Coors Field, a park where your batting average on balls in play increases because of the massive gaps in the outfield. He can just turn singles into doubles, doubles into triples. So he fits very well in that park also. Zach Neto and Carlos Correa getting some ownership. I'm not getting too much of either of them. Allocating, ownership to Win and then just getting some lower owned guys. Neto and Correa are both obviously perfectly fine. Cannon has been better against right-handed hitters, as I mentioned. And Correa, again, if you get to the non-pinch hit guys on the Twins, I like it. Everything I said about Royce Lewis makes sense. It's one-off, 2-3-man stacks with Correa I would like, but overall, he's just not showing up a ton for me. I am getting to Tovar over the field going up against Michael McGreevy. I'm a little surprised the Rockies just aren't getting more ownership, and that being the case, I'll gladly get a little bit above the field. 5,700 is very expensive, so that's probably part of the reason. He has $1,000 more than Mason Wynn. They project basically the same. So once again, you're just going to get Wynn as a quote unquote better play, but you can pay up to be contrarian with Tovar. That ceiling is obviously still there. I like Trevor Story batting cleanup at 3,300. Basically 2x the field on him, 2x the field on Bogarts. At 3,900, I like that. 2x the field on 4K Josh Smith with the platoon advantage against Mitch Spence. 2x on Gunnar Henderson against a relatively popular Clark Schmidt in Yankee Stadium. We know, obviously, the power upside that Gunnar has, but then you also throw him into Yankee Stadium with the short porch in right field, and he's going to look really good. So shortstop, with the exception of Wynn, is a position where I'm spreading out and basically just getting 2x on a lot of different guys, giving up basically Neto and Correa to be able to do so. Who's projected catcher for the Padres? I don't know who I had in. I had Higashioka as the projected catcher, but obviously could be either of them. Can we have a home run call? Yeah, I'll get one at the end of the show. I always forget to prepare one before the show, and then you guys remember to ask, and at the end I just kind of mention whoever stuck out in my head as I walk through, and it seems to work really well. So hopefully somebody pops up, because that hasn't really been the case so far. But yeah, I'll come up with something at the end. In the outfield, a lot of guys, 10 to 20% owned for me. Luis Robert at the top, 4,100 against Kahanowitz, perfectly fine with me. Obviously, going to the White Sox isn't very appealing. I will not miss doing that like every single day when the season ends. But the price has come down. Robert does still have talent, stolen base upside, power upside. Lars Nootbaar right around the field. Jarren Duran very aggressively over the field on him at 5,500. I do like that. Just gives you stolen base upside, gives you a lot of power. Toronto is fine for home runs. It's not like Fenway Park is great for left-handed home runs. So playing in Toronto isn't a big deal for Duran, I don't think. Burleson, 4,600, very fair price tag. I am getting around the field on Margot. I don't love that one, but again, he is just being 2,300 and leading off. There is a good chance that he's getting like 3 at-bats, which is fine. I would prefer to just not be getting as much as the field, but it is what it is. Overall, not getting to Minnesota. Margot is showing up, though, as a leadoff guy at 2,300 in a good matchup. Over the field on Tatis looks good. Benintendi looks good against Kahanowitz. Jesus Sanchez, 3,300 batting cleanup against Ober. Again, I assume he's mostly within Miami stacks. I wouldn't want tons of just one-off Jesus Sanchez running around, but within stacks, yeah, all 6 Jesus Sanchez lineups have at least one other Marlin. That is how I would want that to look. Just correlate with his teammates. For the field, Donovan. So I'm not getting Donovan in the outfield at all. So I am overall right around the field on Brendan Donovan, around the field on Nootbaar, around the field on Burleson and Margot. Field's getting to Ward. I'm not really getting there, which again, it's an okay spot overall going up against Cannon and the White Sox. But again, Cannon has been good at he's a ground ball pitcher. He has been good at limiting power to right-handed bats. Not to talk anyone off of Taylor Ward, but he's someone that I don't mind that I'm not really getting as much of. I like that I am getting to Buxton here. The fact I'm getting to Buxton and Margot in the outfield, where it's not hard to get good hitters, does make me kind of wonder why I'm not getting more of Lewis and Correa at weaker positions at third base and shortstop. But probably, or maybe like a pricing thing, although Lewis was only 4,400. So I don't know. Ideally, I would like to be just getting more Correa and Lewis. It does concern me that I don't have as much of them, but I do like that I'm getting to Buxton here. not getting to a ton of Jordan Walker at 3,600. Brenton Doyle is not, or no, he is in the lineup. He's batting third, so getting right around the field on him. Very high upside guy. He has probably, I haven't actually looked at numbers, but I would guess Doyle's probably made the biggest improvement year over year offensively. He was always a elite defensive outfielder, has arguably the best arm in baseball, but his jump offensively this year has been drastic, and I don't really think gets talked about because the Rockies are so bad. Nobody cares about the Rockies, but Brenton Doyle's made really, really massive strides at the plate, so perfectly fine getting to him. Already talked about Tatis. Goes without saying, if you get the Aaron Judge or Juan Soto, that's fine. But those price tags are healthy. $7K for Aaron Judge, $6,500 for Juan Soto. I did not realize. I thought Jake was exaggerating. If Ohtani is $7,500 in Chavez Ravine, what's he going to be priced at Coors coming up? He should be like $9K. He should probably be $9K in LA also. But yeah, it's nice to see DraftKings not punt on their pricing at the end of the year. It wouldn't have surprised me at all if we were just still talking about Shohei Ohtani at like 5,900 or something because it's NFL season. But it is nice to see that pretty aggressive pricing here down the stretch, making it actually difficult to get to Ohtani and Judge and Soto. You can see I don't have any Ohtani. I do have some Judge and some Soto. As far as home run calls, this one's still tough. Like there's not a lot that stood out as far as a matchup I really liked in a good park, especially for not a stud like cheating hitter. I'll go with Machado against Knack in Dodger Stadium. Yeah, that's gonna be the home run call here. But I don't know. I'm not as confident in it as like when I called Yastrzemski and Wallner the last couple of weeks, it just felt right. This is more of the like, yeah, I can see it, but I don't feel as good about it. But yeah, I'll go with Machado. Did I already answer the Twins Padres single entry stack? I didn't see that question. Let me scroll back up. Do I like a 4-4 Twins Padres stack for single entry? Yeah, I think that accomplishes a lot of what you're trying to accomplish. Minnesota is going to be one of the higher projected stacks. They offer some value. I do have concerns about Margot and Farmer potentially getting pinch hit for it, but they are really cheap. I like Lewis a lot, Correa a lot. At least the matchup, how much I'm getting in large field varies, but I like the matchup for Correa, Lewis, Buxton. There was somebody else in there that I like that I'm just blanking on. But the point being, Minnesota is going to be a relatively popular stack, but they will get less ownership, I would assume, than the Cardinals. So they're not the most owned team. But then the Padres aren't likely to get any ownership. So pairing them with Minnesota pretty much alleviates your ownership concerns. The Twins are affordable, so you can get good pieces around them. I do think they work well together as a double stack and single entry. You're not doing too much to limit your chances of success. You're not taking on tons of ownership. So, and you should be able to put good pieces around them too. So yeah, I like them in single entry. So to recap, pretty spread out offensively with my stacks, which I expect on a slate like this, where a lot of teams have similar implied run totals. As far as pitching goes, Bailey Ober at the top for me, getting to pretty good amounts of Brandon Pfaadt, Bowden Francis, Nathan Eovaldi, right around the field on Valdez, Schmidt, slightly below on Strellenbach, and then just kind of mixing and matching some other guys. So pretty spread out. Not a lot that like jumps off the page as being great plays on this slate. A lot of stuff that looks really similar to each other. Other than that, thanks for checking out the show. Don't forget to sign up for Endgame Syndicate using the link in the description below. All of my content is living on that site now as well, under the insight section, daily insight section. So my NFL/strikeout prop bets are up over there. My game-by-game notes for NFL are up over there. My daily projections, optimal percentages, all of that stuff is up over there. If you don't play enough volume, that it makes sense for you to sign up for Endgame because of the price point. You can get access to my content through the Dub Club link as well for the upcoming NFL season, but highly recommend checking out Endgame. Our goal over there is to improve your process, make you better, create a situation where ultimately you are saving money on subscriptions and things that you need to pay for because you have a better idea of how to win at DFS and you can cut some of that stuff out. So hopefully, over time, our expectation is that it saves you money and you are able to more consistently make money at DFS. So highly recommend checking that out. Josh asked if I'm on the correct mic. Probably not. I didn't actually check that before the show. Nope, I am not. it's actually not plugged in at all, which would make sense. So yeah, I guess I should hire a producer. But other than that, thanks for putting up with the shitty mic throughout the show. Hit the thumbs up button. I will be back same time tomorrow, and I will also plug in my mic for that show. So thanks again. Hit the thumbs up on the way out the door.